If you're stuck creating e-learning that doesn't engage learners because you just don't have the time to look for an innovative idea and implement it, you're in the right place. In this video, I'm going to design a training game right in front of you using lots of gamification tactics that you're going to be able to apply to your e-learning right away. I've been in this space for 10 years and I support e-learning designers who want to create gamified training without gimmicks. So if you want to be able to achieve that quickly, you can work with me directly. Just book a call at the link below. Now let's get started. When you're making a training game, it's essential that you let your learning objectives tell you what the game should be. Last year on this channel, I made a game to teach people how to identify birds. Today's game is going to be about how to identify rocks, which sounds similar, but you'll see that it's going to lead us into an entirely different game. IDing a bird is about pure knowledge. This is a puffin, you either know it or you don't. The score is basically 1 or 0 here, and there's no range of scores because you can't sort of know that. But we always try to have a broader range of outcomes because that allows us to more precisely track how well people are doing, which means that we can celebrate every bit of progress and we can better set the difficulty for exactly where they are in that journey. So in my bird game, even though it's either or and the score is 1 or 0, I was also giving you points for how fast you were at identifying the bird, so I was partly using speed to evaluate you. Speed is what I call a skill dimension because it's a spectrum. You can be faster or slower or anywhere in between, so that gives me a nice spread of possible scores. But I was able to use speed back in the bird game because birds fly away, so you have to be quick. Speed is relevant for that learning goal. But rocks stay in place for like millennia, so I can't really justify using speed here. You don't have to hurry. But what I can use is precision. If I say that this is a sedimentary rock, that's right, but it's not very precise. That's 75% of all surface rocks. I can be more precise by saying it's clastic, and even more specifically sandstone, and even more specifically Arcos sandstone. And that'll give me a relevant range of outcomes. So my learning objective is going to be, when given a rock to identify, the learner will have an average precision score of 80% or better. Now let's start designing the game. I always start with my final challenge. What should the person be able to do perfectly by the end of this training? I imagine it's going to be something like I'm given a rock and I can place it in one of these groups. The more precisely I pinpoint it, the more points I get. So if I can only put it in one of these 3 major groups here, that's 1 point. Then 1 more point if I get the subtype, 1 more for specific type, and maybe 2 extra points if I get the exact identity. Also, as usual, I'm going to create a very basic functional prototype of this right away. Here's what that looks like. So now I have to figure out how I'm going to get a newbie learner to be able to do this with high precision. And of course, we're never going to give them the answers. We're letting them figure it out. So first, let's deal with how to tell these 3 main groups apart. The traditional way would be to explain the characteristics of each category: igneous, metamorphic, sedimentary, and then we'd quiz them on those characteristics. A better way would be to give them a rock to classify so that they have to apply the knowledge, but in that case, we'd still have that passive teaching phase. So instead, we're going to turn that into a challenge to make them figure it out themselves, detective style, using an active teaching tactic. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask you right away to pick the igneous rock from these options, and to help you, I'm going to show you a bunch of them. That means you have to figure out the rule for yourself by noticing that all of these have crystals, and so you're going to pick the one that's got the crystals. There's no way to get this right unless you're paying attention and using deduction. We're not just telling you this is igneous and then asking you later on to simply repeat it. And after a bit of practice, I can actually ask you what these rocks all have in common so that you now have to assemble the rule in your head instead of being told the rule. So that's how I could introduce new information without giving it to the learner. And that works for a lot of these categories, but there's a wrinkle. You see, sometimes you can't ID a rock just by looking at it, and you have to run some tests on the rock, like looking at it under a microscope, scratching it with a nail, scratching some glass with the rock, dropping some acid on the rock, not that kind of drop acid, shining a UV light on the rock, etc. So we're going to have to simulate those tests, and the learner is going to have to know when and how to use them. So to introduce that, again, I'm going to pose this in the form of a problem to solve. Here's some marble and here's some quartzite. Where does this rock go? It's not obvious just by looking at it, so I'm going to let the learner run this acid test on as many rocks as they want. Eventually you realize that all the marble bubbles when you drop acid on it and none of the quartzite does. So then they can run the test on the sample and they say, oh, this is marble, they get it right and they feel clever. Here's another way I can teach them this actively. I give them the entire cheat sheet and I let them run all the tests they want. In this test, I'll scratch a piece of glass with this crystal. If it scratches the glass, that means that it's harder than glass, so its hardness is higher than the 5.5 of glass. So that narrows it down to these, which have a higher hardness. There's a ton of these active teaching tactics, and if you want to know them all, you can join my program. Again, the link is below. So in my introduce loops, I'm making them discover the rules by giving them a lot of extra information. The specimens from the category, or letting them try tests on known specimens, or giving them the cheat sheet. Then in the practice loops, I'm showing these rocks again, but I'm gradually taking those hints away bit by bit to increase the difficulty. And this is just one method by which you can play with difficulty. You can also have it change for each learner automatically based on how well they're doing. So we increase difficulty until the final assess loops where it's real life conditions and no more hints, and they just have the rock and the test. So I'll go through like this, and I'll plan all my levels where I'm going to introduce each new group, each new test, and all the challenges where I'm going to combine all these things together. As you can see, this doesn't have to be done in a linear way, and I like to give the learner some choice as to where they go next in the progression wherever I can. So once they've done these 3 main groups, maybe they get to choose what to unlock next. At this point, I also have to figure out how I'm going to gate and unlock my content. So what kinds of scores are they going to need in order to be able to unlock the next thing? Remember that if my learning objective is that they have to have 80% precision, then I have to make sure they get 80 pretty much everywhere so that they reach that overall goal. Okay, so that's the cognitive mechanics sorted, and now for the motivational mechanics, there's a lot of fun stuff we can do. I've decided that I'm going to limit the number of tests they get. So I'm going to give them 1 free test per rock, and if they want to run more tests, they have to earn them. So now we have to figure out how they'll earn them. We could decide that the more points you earn, the more tests you get, but that will favor people who are already doing well. If you're struggling to ID the rocks, then we're punishing you by withholding the tests that would help you ID the rocks, and then you can get into a downward spiral, which is exactly why I hate Monopoly. So instead, I'm going to encourage persistence. So we'll just say that for every new rock that you try to identify, whether you get it right or wrong, that attempt goes towards earning you a test. And once you've filled out this gauge, you'll get a test, and the type of test you get will be picked at random. So there's a little output randomness here for a little extra dopamine. Another idea is that we could give them some minerals to collect, and when you complete a collection, maybe you'll get a test of your choice or some other hoardable power-up. Power-ups always depend on what your activities are, so here it could be something that allows you to swap one test for another if you didn't get the test that you wanted. That would be a really fun power-up to have at hand. I like these mechanics because they're useful rewards, and I'm already building these tests anyway, so I don't have to come up with more stuff like trophies. I'm using what I've already built. And once everything is designed and prototyped, I just have to actually build the whole thing. So to do that, I'm just turning my prototypes into a template, I'm swapping the content everywhere, and the game is built. And then all that's left is to polish to make everything pretty, and I'm done. In this video, I've been showing you the final result because it just makes the video prettier, but when I'm building it, it actually looks more like this. I would only polish at this point when I'm happy with the design and everything works. The design took me about a day, much of which was gathering information about rocks because I know nothing about rocks. And then once it's designed, the game will take about a day or 2 to build. What saves me time is that I'm laser focusing on making activities that are relevant to the learning objective. I am not waiting for inspiration to strike. I'm getting the ideas from the content itself. But I hope this did spark your imagination, and if you're sick of traditional e-learning and you're not sure where to start, book a call with me, join my program, the Effective Gamification Framework, where I go over all the tactics, cognitive and motivational. The link to apply is down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.